Yeah, some of the great Yankee players in the 80s and late 70s are going to be talked about on this week's edition of Park Ridge Sports History. And in addition to that, some of the players from the 1960s team, which finished in last place, something that I have already covered in a previous show, but I'd like to revisit. Hi, everyone. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History, welcoming you to another edition of the show. And as always, I want to thank you for allowing me into your homes, and a special shout out to Howard Frederick, who continues to edit this program with great acumen. Gets rid of maybe all my mistakes and all my lighting problems and all the rest of it. This week, though, I do have a cartoon that has everything to do, and I'll post that right now as well. And it has to do with, well, let's just put it up there. I'm going to do my best from A Christmas Story.
Madden, NBA, MLB. You've obsessed playing these games. What's your father say?
Ask him. He's upstairs on his office computer playing against me.
And again, it is the wonderful magic of fantasy baseball. And this is what really got the cartoon does have something to do with the show in this respect. And that is that when I do shows or I come up with a cartoon and I get the inspiration, I start to think, oh, wow, where I was seeing this, or what was I thinking about? Well, this past week with the Yankees kind of mired in a slow walk of mediocrity, and of course being bested by the Tampa Bay Rays, both in Tampa Bay and now in New York, I got to thinking, and especially with the Yankee fans throwing trash onto the field after a recent loss to the Rays. And of course, I am not overlooking the fact that nobody should throw garbage onto the field, but it does add to the romance of sports. But I also think it does point out sometimes how I think the Yankee fans just don't appreciate being a Yankee fan, and that is they are the most successful sports franchise in North American sports history, with over 24 world championships, 27, over 40 some odd appearances in the World Series. As I told a buddy of mine, in the history of baseball, basically the Yankees are playing in the World Series once every 3 years. Now I understand. They do expect excellence. They do spend, or it's perceived that they spend the most money on the players, and those players they think are championship caliber players. I get all that. But at the same time, this is where I got the idea of the sports fantasy cartoon this week, or the Madden. And that is, there are so many video games out there today and so many fantasy leagues that really take in to the idea of drafting players and cobbling together your own perceived championship team, that I got to be honest with you, it's harder to do than it is to say you're building a championship team. Think about this, all you Yankee fans who play fantasy sports. When was the last time you actually dominated your fantasy baseball league? Well, I'm waiting. Me, I played many years ago, and I thought I was the elite sports authority, all things baseball. And I probably put myself really high up there when I won the first fantasy league I was ever in. And then the first year where I actually drafted players, my partner and I also won. Well, I shouldn't say take me as giving myself all the credit. My partner and I really did a nice job putting that together. It's the one I've spoken about where I grabbed Bill Swift, and we were able to secure a lead, which we never lost. However, all the ensuing years that I played, well, I could pack up right after the draft and just fork over all my money because I just did not do a good job in the draft. And the people who I thought were never going to be there at the end, they wound up winning. And that's what I mean. It is such a difficult thing to win, especially on the pro sport level. There's just so much involved. And yes, the perception that you can go out and grab all these all-stars and that they are going to perform up to their baseball card biographies and stats each year is really not doing it or doing your homework the right way. Only the elite players you can really pencil in. And we have seen that on Park Ridge Sports where guys go up and down in their career, or they have 3 really good seasons and then they disappear. And you say to yourself, wow, you're really arguing whether this guy should be on the cusp or in the Hall of Fame, where he has 3, 4, 5 good years and then down. And I've even brought this up using some of the websites I've gone to, and I'm saying, wow, this guy had a really good season and then just lost it. And then when you look at his statistical average, it's not as high as maybe his great seasons, of course. So putting together a team is very difficult. And I think that's why Americans, we do start to obsess over our fantasy baseball leagues. But I was looking at this. I have to tell you this, and Howard has experienced this. I actually do another a podcast for a Canadian group. And every once in a while, when I send this video to Howard, I mix them up. And right now, Howard, I have to apologize. Hopefully that won't ever happen again, but you know inevitably it will. But I was thinking about this the other day. And of course, I do follow the Blue Jays for a number of reasons. One is they are an interesting bunch of players in that they have 3 players right now who they are highly touted, that the Blue Jay front office has been pushing. They see star material in them, maybe even potentially superstardom. And I'm talking about Vlad Guerrero Jr., Cam Biggio, and Bo Bichette, one of my favorite names of all time, because right away, most baseball fans who are Star Wars fans think of Bo Bichette as another member of the Mandalorians. Anyway, I was looking at those 3 guys. And last year, of course, the Blue Jays make the playoffs. And they do it with a late surge in the season, 32-28. They finish and they get into the playoffs. And I was thinking about this. Well, they have these 3 highly touted youngsters. What was the record of the Blue Jays when all 3 played in the game? And I was actually amazed. And I'm sure that the Blue Jay front office has all this information, but I just thought it would be fun. And I really thought I was going to have to do quite a bit of research on this. But really, I only had last year's stats and really the first half dozen games of this year. And I discovered this, that last year, and it was really amazing because I know this, Bichette goes down with an injury last year. And so he kind of missed about at least 10 to 15 games of the Blue Jays, which is like missing 40 games of a regular season, because those 60 games are really a season and there's still that's almost double. You double that to 120 and then another half of that. So you're talking about 1.5 times. So missing 20 games was like missing 40, maybe even 50 games of the season last year for Bo Bichette. Anyway, when he does return, I was looking at this. I did a statistical breakdown like I love to do, and I discovered that they only played last year in 32 games together, over half. But the Blue Jays, remarkably, were only 11-21 in the games that those 3 played. Now, I will state this. It seemed, and of course, I'm just being anecdotal in this. I have to do a little bit more research and really go back. And as I was going through this, if it wouldn't have confused me more, I would like to have seen where they were in the order. But there were a number of times where the manager put them back to back to back, and it seemed to work. But I want to say it seemed to work, but I don't have the 1-loss record for that. But it just seemed to work. But actually, remarkably, the 3 of them combined for 469 at-bats. They had 129 hits, and I'm including this year as well. So far, when they played, and of course, this year, they were 5-8 together. So overall, in the 2 seasons that they are playing, and of course, remember, got injuries to Bichette. They're young players. I know that Biggio has been saddled with kind of a slump. He's only hitting, I believe, 170, 171 going into today's ball games. So he's been mired in a slump trying to get out of that. A typical young player's problems. And I think he'll be able to right his own ship and all the rest of it. But nonetheless, the three have totaled 469 at bats together, playing in the same, with each of them playing in the same game, with 129 hits, 22 doubles, 2 triples, and 22 home runs. Not bad, with 72 runs scored and 62 RBI. Now, I had said in the other podcast, the 62 RBIs is not bad because this is only about 45 games. So let's just say that's 50 games. So triple that 60, and you're talking about 180 RBIs. So each one basically would be giving you 22 and about 62 RBIs. That's not bad for 3 players all producing that. Now, obviously, Guerrero, we know that he's more of the power hitter. Obviously, he would probably go up. Bichette is to me, the wild card in the whole thing because looking at his stats, he definitely has speed. He definitely has pop in his bat. And I know this. He's had some breakout games, 3 for 5, 2 for 4. And last year, he had an unbelievable game where he went 5 for 5 in a ball game with a home run, 3 runs scored, and an RBI. He's also had a number of games where he's had a couple of doubles, a couple of home runs already this year, a 2-run home run, a 2-homer game this year. So these 3 definitely have brilliance in their game. Whether they can and here's going to be the big thing. Can they do it together? And can the Blue Jays be successful with the 3 of them in the lineup? Right now, if you're arguing against any of the 3, you'd say, well, the Blue Jays have lost 29 of the 45 games that the 3 have been together. And I must say a caveat. I did include 2 games in which Biggio came in as a pinch runner and Vlad Guerrero came in as a pinch hitter. I just wanted to get maybe a little bit more statistical information. Biggio didn't have an at-bat in the game, and Guerrero was 0 for 1. And I believe in both games they lost. And that was the only reason I wanted to bring them in, because technically I said to myself, let's just see when all 3 are in there. All right. So they're really, let's say, 16 and 27 when they've all been in there together in the starting lineup. Nevertheless, they've only won 16 of the 42 games they've been together. And I really believe this. And since I have touted the 3, I guess I am going to fight and support my idea that I think they will be successful. And they are a pretty cool story in baseball right now. I mean, 3 sons of 3 all-stars, all really good players, 2 of them getting to the Hall of Fame. And the other, Bo Bichette, also led the league in hitting when he was in Colorado. So he was a very good player. And I also think this. I think Bichette also led in batting when he was with the Reds. If I have a chance, I'm going to take a look at that. That's just one of those things I'm thinking of. And of course, anybody who watches this show religiously or even tunes in every once in a while because you can't get to sleep in the middle of the night, you'll know that I love thinking off the top of my head as if we're just conversing together in a bar, having a beer, etc., and we're thinking all things baseball and sports related. So these things come to me, and I wish actually that it did come to me prior to the show. That's what happens. Anyway, Bichette, Vlad Guerrero, and Biggio, all products of Major League ball players. And not only that, but they were successful Major League ball players. Because when we get to the Yankees, we're going to be talking about maybe Mickey Mantle, 1966, when he's on the cusp of his career, getting ready to retire. And of course, his son, Mickey Mantle Jr., never could break into the major leagues. And of course, the Yankees also have a great Hall of Famer here from Jersey, Yogi Berra, whose son Dale Berra does make the major league roster with both the Yankees and the Pittsburgh Pirates. In fact, Dale Berra still, I think, holds the record for reaching on catcher interference the most times in one season with 8. That is hey, listen, it's a record. I'll take it. But Dale was a pretty good player. I don't think he has the potential that these 3 players have. Nevertheless, you know that there's a lot of pressure being the son of a great baseball player. And the 2 I just mentioned were both Hall of Fame players with the Yankees. So it is a great story seeing these 3 Blue Jay players getting to the major leagues, playing on the same team, and the Blue Jay front office really putting or staking a lot in these 3 players. And I think they can handle it. That's number 1. But number 2, I think they will be successful. Now, Biggio, as I said, he's had some hitting woes, but I know that the Blue Jays are very excited with the fact that he's the money ball type of player, goes deep into the count, can draw a lot of walks. There were a couple of games there where he took the collar. Oh, and that's one other thing, too, I've noticed with the 3. I thought it's going to be very rare. I only counted about 3 or 4 instances where all 3 didn't get a hit or didn't do anything offensively. And that's my whole point with Biggio. And it's something I always remember Joe Morgan saying, that the beauty of baseball is that you can be over 3 in a game and yet still be offensively productive, because you could still potentially score 3 runs. And how does that happen? A couple of force plays, you're on first base, then you steal. A couple of bases and you're knocked in with a sac fly, or you get into scoring position and you're knocked in with a double, or you walk and you work your way around the bases. Well, Biggio did that in a number of games. He was 0 for 3 and scored a couple of runs. So we know this. The guys have speed. I'm not saying they're all 5-tool ball players. That remains to be seen. I know that Biggio and Bichette can play a number of infield positions. Probably Vlad Guerrero Jr. is probably an outfielder / first baseman / DH, but they have some talent. And I think the Blue Jays will right the ship. And maybe the fact that they are 16 and 29 in the games that they've been together, maybe it's just a case of everyone just filling each other out and really collectively working and just getting on the same page. And I know that baseball lineups or an offense is totally different in baseball than it is in football, hockey, or basketball. But there is a certain amount of a feeling of where you are in the lineup. And it seems like the Blue Jay manager isn't so far comfortable where to put them. And I think once they find a spot for all 3 players, I think the Blue Jays will take off. And you could actually argue this, even though they weren't successful last year as a trio going 11 and 21, the Blue Jays still make the playoffs at 32 and 28, meaning that the other players on their team are shining or rising to the occasion. So you have nothing but positives here because, hey, if they ever right their ship, think of how good the Blue Jays can be. Think of how good the Blue Jays can be, which is maybe why Yankee fans are right now kind of worried about what their team is going to do this year. And that's why I brought this up. I was thinking about this when I was doing the show and when I saw that story about the Yankee fans. And that is this. The Tampa Bay Rays, they right now own the Yankees. It's just one of those things in baseball. Sometimes you just don't match up. Sometimes you're in a slump. Sometimes you meet the other team when they are hot and you're cold, or you're bound to get cold because that baseball is hills and valleys and all the rest of it. But right now, I was thinking about this. Yankee fans should not panic. And I went through, let's say, and I used Baseball Reference because I love it. I went through the Yankees season by season. So I went back to 1966, and we had already covered 66 with that Yankee club. They won 73 games and finished in last place. Now you say to yourself, okay, 73 wins is not all that bad, because let's just say you lost 4 games in extra innings or 4 games in the last at bat. Now all of a sudden you're 77 and 87, maybe 79 and 83, very close to 500. Regardless, the Yankees finished in 10th place, but the Yankees were 73 and 89. And for Yankee fans out there, don't give up on this team. I know they look ugly right now. I know a lot of things aren't clicking with them, but this Yankee team, I think to a man, is probably more talented than that 66 team. Although I've gone through that before, and there were a number of players that the Yankees will build upon that will get them ready. Well, it will take them 10 years, but they will get better as the seasons progress. But that 73 and 89 team, do you realize this? When I was looking this up, do you know that they finished in 10th place, in last place, but that they finally hit rock bottom? Everybody thinks it was in April or even July when the Yankees finished rock bottom. Do you realize it took until September 18th for the Yankees basically become the tenants of last place in the American League? They were at one point in 6th place. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but remember that it was a 10-place or a 10-team league back in the mid-60s, and then they bottom out. But to their success, and maybe to the credit of Ralph Houck, they do finish winning 4 of their last 7, even though they do finish in last place. That Yankee team lost 30 of their last 50 games in 1966. At one point, they were 50 and 59. And that was, I think, the closest they came to 500. And I'm not talking about 0-1, 1-1, 1-2, although I don't even think the Yankees that year did that. But on August the 6th, that was probably the closest they came to 500. They were 50 and 59. And then they basically bottom out, winning only 23 of their last, going 23 and 30 over the last 53 games. But it took them until September to say, we're going to finish in last place. And I was looking at this. Ready? I found this, and I apologize. They're black and white. I guess I have to change the ink in the printer, although maybe they just came in as black and white. Just take a look at some of the players on that team, and then you'll wonder why they finished in last place. Ray Barker at first base. Now, they do have Mel Stadomir, who probably, it's a shame, had Stadomir came probably in the late 50s and been probably allied with Whitey Ford, you might be talking about a Hall of Fame pitcher, because he does win 20 games a number of times. In fact, this is where I'm going to go here. And I have spoken about Mel Stadomir before. Mel actually won 12 games that year. He lost 20. And like I've stated before, I've heard many managers say, hey, if you lose 20 games in a season, you can't be that bad of a pitcher. He started 37 games that year, and he completed 9 of them. And he had a save and 3 shutouts. And Mel totaled 251 innings. Now, his career, he had a 43 WAR, and he was 164 and 139, 25 games over 500, and an under 3 ERA. He had a 2.97 earned run average lifetime. And of course, he was 20 and 9 in 1965, 12 and 20, 15 and 15. Then he was 21 and 12. He was 20 and 14, makes his, 4th of 5 All-Star games in 1969. And of course, he is named the starting pitcher when Denny McLain decides he's going to be helicoptered in on the game day. Goes 20-14. Now that was Mel's last 20-game winning season, but he's 2 games over 500 in 1970, 4 over in 1971. His best is probably his worst year, statistically speaking. Ready for this? 1972, he's 14-18. Still has a 3.22 ERA. He threw 260 innings. He had 7 shutouts in a year he went 14-18. That's incredible. So if he doesn't have those shutouts, he'd be 7-18. Clearly, Mel is one of those players, and it's a shame that he was situated on a successful franchise in the wrong decade. He is the quintessential player who was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong team. And that was the Yankees of the late 60s and early 70s. I know that in 1970, they finished in second place to the Orioles, but it wasn't even that close. And he is 15-13. But Mel put up some good numbers and to have an ERA, as I know, it was probably the decade of the pitcher. But a guy who played for mediocre teams to be 24 games over 500, to actually finish with an average of 16-13. Bob Gibson, according to the Baseball Reference, had a 16-12 average over 162 games. So you're talking about a very good pitcher. Now, Mel never gets to the promised land with the Yankees. He's out of the game by 74, I believe. Yeah, by 74 at age 32. Probably his arm gave out. It's a shame because maybe if he stayed, he probably could have played on that pennant-winning team in 76. It is a real shame. But Stadomir leaves the game a couple of years too soon. But like I said, he was a good player, a really good player. I mean, I don't think anybody, and again, I always bring up the Reds. You don't think the Reds could have used him in the 70s? You don't think the Pirates or the Cubs couldn't have used him? Maybe he gets the Cubs to the promised land as well. Maybe the Red Sox in 72 when the AL East Division instead of losing it by a half game. So that's Mel Stadomir. Here's another guy on that list. Ready? Joe Pepitone, who is, without a doubt, a character. I'm going to do a show on the 69 Seattle Pilots because I think it's important because Jim Bouton does have some Joe Pepitone stories, which are fun. But Pepitone that year in 1966, he had 31 homers, 83 RBIs. Ready for this? Basically, here are the Yankees in 1966. And it's interesting because Elston Howard, probably his last full-time season with the Yankees, because remember in 67, the Yankees trade him to the Red Sox, and he does get to play for another pennant, the Impossible Dream Team, Boston Red Sox, who lose in 7 to the Cardinals. But you had Howard at catcher for the most part, 126 games. Pepitone at first, Bobby Richardson. He basically is 30 years old, but he's on the other side of 30. Horace Clark. Horace Clark was playing shortstop, had no range, is moved to second, had no range. Probably the only range he had was the one he carried with him out of the dugout and onto the field. He was never known as a good defensive player. And I think I just remember him having to say the least, an exotic or unique stance where it seemed like his elbow, or he was in a squat. And I don't know how he hit out of that, but it wasn't too successful because I think he was maybe a 230 to 250 hitter lifetime. They had Clete Boyer playing third base. Now, the only guy who's a link to their first pennant and then their first championship in 77 is Roy White. And I brought up Roy White. He's like Ed Kranepool. There's not too many players that are not superstars. They're good players who manage to stay with the same team their entire career. I think of Roy White and Ed Kranepool, and neither one of them are Hall of Fame players. and yet they stayed with their New York teams throughout their entire career. Usually those guys are either set adrift, replaced by young upcoming players, and maybe the ball clubs do them a favor and trade them to a pennant contender so they can DH, pinch hit, and be late season or late innings defensive kind of guys. Because that was what Paul Blair was later on with the New York Yankees. Got him a couple more World Series appearances. Mickey Mantle, of course, even at age 35, 34, with his body breaking down, he still was able to hit 23 homers, 56 RBIs, and hit 288. I think the most impressive thing there is the fact that he's able to hit 288 and that he was able to draw 57 walks that year. So he had a 288 batting average. Mickey Mantle at age 35, excuse me, I don't know why I keep saying 5. He can barely walk, let alone run. But he has a 389 on-base percentage, which, of course, leads the team. Great players, even when they're fading, are still great players among their peers. And, of course, Roger Maris. Really, Maris would be traded and get one more shot in the World Series with the Cardinals. He was 1343 and 233. He's age 31, and without a doubt, probably the home run record really, really had a impact on the rest of his career. Roger was a really good player. In fact, Mantle always talks about his great defensive skills and his baseball acumen as a ball player. And maybe for Roger, he is also, in many respects, like Stadomir, with one caveat. He's in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong team. But at least he wins. And he is successful, winning a couple of championships with the Yankees. I wonder, though, had Roger Maris done that 60 home run, would it have been different in a different city with a different team? You know, if he was doing that with the Cubs, and of course I always bring up the Cubs, or maybe with the Dodgers, or maybe with, well, I won't say the Giants because you have Mays, so he probably would have had the same problems there. But think of him maybe with the Red Sox, because even though Yaz was there in 62 or 61, he was only a rookie. And maybe Maris takes the pressure off Yaz, but of course they have Ted Williams a year removed from retirement. So Maris, maybe in a different place. Like I said, maybe if he were playing for St. Louis way back when. And maybe, and here's something weird, maybe just the opposite, playing with Musial in the late stages of his career, maybe Musial would have been a great mentor for him and had him handle the press and all the rest of it. It's a big what if. And if, of course, is always the biggest word in the English language when we're talking about these types of possibilities. It's just a fun thing to think about. Another guy in that team, ready for this? I mentioned before, he's a rookie in 66, Fritz Peterson. And Peterson, of course, well, I won't go into his off the field because I want to always keep this a family show as much as possible. But Fritz was a real good pitcher who just lost it. You know, he won 20 games, I believe, in 1970. Does make the All-Star team. I'm just going to give it up. He does have a 21 WAR. He finishes 133 and 131 on that 66 team. And in 1970, his greatest season, he has a 2.90 ERA with 20 wins. Not bad. Not bad at all. Okay? Now, I wanted to just turn this. So I want Yankee fans to remember this. It ain't over until it's over. And just because you're mired right now in an early season slump doesn't mean that you can't right the ship. And with the talent that the Yankees have with Stanton and Judge being trotted out there for your starting team, I'm thinking maybe the depth that the Yankees still have. I'm not giving up on Gardner. I think he's a useful player. I think he's a winning ball player. The Yankees are in good shape. Plus, they have some pretty good pitching there. I know they really haven't shown it, but it'll come around. And I think as the weather warms up, they'll be even better. I just want to show you this. And this, I want to point out the 1980 season. Well, let's go to the 1991 season. I just want to say this. And this is a team that finished, and this is why I'm saying that the Yankees of 1966 were 73 and 89. And winning 73 games and finishing in 10th place, it's not that bad. Actually, it really shows that the league was highly competitive, or that the teams were actually closer. And the reason why I say this was that in 1991, the Yankees were 71 and 91 and finished in 5th place in a 7-division AL East. And that 71-91 team, they were actually 44 and 43 on the 20th of July with a win against Oakland. But then for some reason, they just went in the tank. And over a month later, by August of 20th, the Yankees over that time, basically a month, lose 20 of 31 games. And that really seals the deal for a 20-game under 500 season. They actually were 55 and 63 the rest of the way in 1991. But there was hope on the horizon for that team. But what I wanted to mention was I didn't realize this, that everyone thinks that 71-91 team, that they were just terrible from the outset. I was kind of amazed that they were actually a game over late in August. Now, I know you basically have half the season to go. You do finish 27 and 48 the remainder of the way. So that's really almost 20 games under 500, 21 games under 500 the rest of the way. But the fact August destroyed them 1 month, but I was amazed that they were actually as good as they were, 44 and 43. I'm not saying they were necessarily fighting for a playoff spot, but that's not too bad either. Had they been able to eliminate, just think, had you gotten rid of August, they would have been they were 60 and 70. Still bad, not as bad, but that August really killed them. And of course, I'm sure that August led into September. This team, though, 80, I just want to bring this one up. And even the 77 team, I'm going to bring this one up. And this is why Yankee fans shouldn't fret. Do you realize that on August 17th, the Yankees were in 3rd place, 1977? Do you realize that? They were in 3rd place. And this is why I'm saying 3rd in a 7-team division. But they were 68 and 50, 18 games over 500. And they had just beaten Detroit. However, with Ed Figueroa on the mound, another guy who I think is underrated on those Yankee teams. You know, Figueroa probably averaged about 16 wins a season for the Yankees. I think he won 19 and 20 actually in 2 seasons with the Yankees. But that Yankee team, but Figueroa also, to me, was a lot like Andy Pettitte, but with this difference. I think if Figueroa were able to play in as many playoff games with the Yankees and maybe had started his career with the Yankees instead of the California Angels, you might be talking about a different pitcher altogether in terms of his career. But that Yankee team in 77, they were 68 and 50 on August 17th. They win 32 of their last 44, basically win at a 73% blitz, and then win the playoffs against the Royals and, of course, the World Series, which is highlighted by the 4 home runs by Reggie Jackson in a row in games 5 and 6. That Yankee team then goes on in 78, 14 and a half out in July, and really railroad the Red Sox and destroy them. Come back and just play at an unbelievable pace and then beat them up in Fenway Park, courtesy of Bucky Dent and all the rest of it. My whole point in these 3 things was that even though you might right now think that your season is lost. Sometimes you're getting rid of maybe all the stale air, all the bad ball right now, and you're going to improve. Sometimes it seems like you're having a good season, and then you go in the tank, a la 1970 or 1991. But the year I thought was really interesting, and I think baseball has to do something about this, or they should have. I didn't realize it until I went over the schedule. Do you realize in 1980, the Yankees and the Orioles really were battling? In fact, the Yankees win by 2.5 games over the Orioles. I believe both teams won 100 games. All right. In fact, the Orioles win 100 games in 1980. But do you realize this? That the Yankees went, or the Orioles never got to play the Yankees. And this is what we're talking about, pennant contenders. Oddly enough, on August 18th was the last time that Baltimore and the Yankees played against each other in 1980. And at that time, the Yankees were up 2.5 games and in first place. The Yankees would go on to win 24 games and only lose 13 the rest of the way. And they played a lot of crummy teams the rest of the way. And it's a shame that baseball had such an odd way of doing the schedule. Might have cost the Orioles a shot. But again, the Yankees, the pedigree that they have and their history, win another pennant. Hey, this is Will O'Toole thanking you again for joining me for Park Ridge Sports History, and we'll be back next week with more, hopefully interesting tidbits on baseball and sports in general. Thank you.